Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. With me today is Tannya Jajal, AI leader, technologist, and founder of AIDEN, a think tank committed to transforming the future of work. Welcome, Tannya.
Thank you so much, Ken.
Okay, Tannya, AI leader. I'm already getting sick and tired of AI. It's like people don't count. We don't know what we're doing with it. We don't know if we've created something that's going to ruin the world. I mean, can't we just determine the role that we want to play and go for it? Why are we becoming slaves to something that we've created? If it really sucks, why don't we go to the wall and just unplug it? Like, it's driving me insane.
Yeah, that option always exists. We always have that option. And I think this is exactly what drove us to create and do the work that we're doing at AIDEN, which is help people navigate that and realize. And I used to tell this anecdote and use this quote often back in the day when I was talking about AI like 5 years ago and no one was listening. And I would often say technology is a double-edged sword. So what we do is with it is completely up to us. The same fire that kept us warm also burnt our houses down, and that's exactly how we should see any other technological innovation. So breaking through the hype is something we're deeply passionate about, and getting people to think critically about how to navigate the space is, I think, as critical or as important a part of the AI equation as understanding what the technology can do.
I think the other thing, I mean, for me is, aren't we just looking for a balance here? Isn't it really just about, say, the ingenuity curve and how human ingenuity and artificial intelligence work together to help us resolve problems? Like, again, I think it's just a human thing of, can we only focus on one thing? It drives me nuts. There's two things here. It's a Venn
Yes.
diagram. What role does each play?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I think for example, for me, the eureka moment with AI was not when ChatGPT came out. It was actually a few years ago when I came across an AI that can compose music. It's called Ava. And a lot of Ava's compositions are online, and today they're on YouTube. So if any of the audience members is curious, they can look into it. But what Ava kind of reminded me of, and starting with Ava, although I think a lot of people don't necessarily know about Ava as an AI composer, but starting with that as an example and then moving forward with all the applications in AI that can help us create, and this new renaissance in art where you see human artists merging with AI artists, what it tells me is that this is a great chance for us, if we want to co-create, right? To kind of see the data as a medium for doing something or creating new kinds of works of art, which is, if you think about the trajectory of human history, we've been doing that for decades. We've been thinking about new ways of expressing ourselves, new ways of being creative, new ways of executing and running more regular things like companies, new ways of building and sending rockets to space and getting them to land back on Earth, right? So for me, this is just simply, the AI curve is simply another expression of that ingenuity, as you say, and it's an opportunity for us to, if we want to co-create with it. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, especially as people feel increasingly afraid of what it can do, which I'm seeing in prevalence amongst many people that we interact with at our work, which is, high performing executives or even just individual school kids, things like that. So
When you talk about some of the higher levels, though, especially, whether it's working or, with leaders, with leadership, with teams or music, there are things like emotional and gut intelligence that AI is so not ready for yet.
yes.
So how do we help people understand the uniqueness that we bring to
Mhm.
leadership, that we bring to creation?
Yeah, I always cite a framework that I've found to be very useful to me over the years. So those in the education space would have heard about educator Howard Gardner, who went to Harvard and did a lot of his seminal work there. And a lot of his research was around what's known as the theory of multiple intelligences. And what Gardner said at the time, maybe two or three decades ago now, actually probably the 1980s, so even further down, was very, very important, because for the first time in human history, we started to see or accept that young people as well as adults can be intelligent in different ways, right? So for the longest time, we measured intelligence through regular IQ tests. But what Gardner says is that there are 7 to 8 different ways of being intelligent. And these are, things like verbal linguistic intelligence, so those who have great command of the English language, things like kinesthetic intelligence, so dancers, sportsmen, people who have great command over their bodies and great coordination skills. But he even goes so far, and then there's a series of them, like visuospatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal intelligence. But he went on to add 2 kinds of intelligences to his theory of multiple intelligences after the first paper was released. And one was pedagogical intelligence, so the ability to teach others, and the other was existential intelligence, so the ability to ponder on the big questions. So I think when I ask people to think about AI, first I get them to look at the types of intelligences and then map the AIs that exist out there to those types of intelligences. So Boston Dynamics, kinesthetic intelligence, for example, right? But then I tell them, and this is what Gardner says, the hardest types of intelligence to automate are things like intrapersonal intelligence, so the ability to self-reflect, existential intelligence, the ability to ponder our nature, ponder our place in this universe, ask the big questions like, what is our purpose? And of course, pedagogical intelligence, which is the ability to sit one-on-one and really understand another person's needs and disseminate knowledge. So those things I think will continue to stay very, very unique, and will continue to let us be human, I guess.
And in that, you brought up something for me that's really critical, and that's the notion of mapping. So many people, I mean, I work a lot with disruptive or wicked challenges, and they're so used to a tame challenge or a complex where, it's something that we can solve. It's something we can come up with a complete solution to. And the tough things today, the disruptive ones, we can't. We have to find a resolution, something that works with all the different forces for today, but we're gonna have to keep watching it, because as technology changes, as the world changes, we're gonna have to sort of, tweak what we're doing. So for me, what you said about, when you mentioned mapping, that's so critical. Understand at the different stages of resolution or bringing something to market, where AIs, where human ingenuity, where all the factors of barriers and macro trends come into play. And it's not something that we're used to doing.
No, I think it's not. It definitely isn't. And it's certainly, I think it takes a certain degree of humility to do the mapping, because you have to also accept that for the first time, we're outsourcing or trying to replicate aspects of our intelligence, right? I mean, we have been doing it for a long time in different ways. That's why machine intelligence, if we don't want to call it artificial intelligence, has evolved in so many different ways since the 1950s Dartmouth Conference. It's just that now we've conceptualized it in a way that almost requires us acknowledging it, right? Acknowledging that actually this could be bigger than us. AI could do better than us in certain domains and certain tasks. So now that we've sort of named the devil, so to say, it requires an element of humility to go in and say, okay, this is what it can actually do and this is what it can't do. And I think a lot of people, especially people who are experts, I see this a lot because I interact with experts, researchers, or people who are really like physicists or doctors or financial analysts. It's very common amongst people who are financial analysts and who are experts in things like the stock market. For people like them who are already pattern recognition geniuses or machines themselves, for them, it's very difficult to acknowledge what AI can and can't do. And for the others who are techno-optimists, or who believe that there's AI that is as intelligent as human intelligence, also known as AGI, for those kinds of people, they also need to bring it down a notch. And that's where the role of mapping becomes really important. And thinking in nuance becomes very, very important, right? So you need to bring in all these different tools to be able to map exactly what the technology can do today. And maybe then you can figure out how you might not use it, right?
Yeah, and again, and that for me is where, when I do my work around ingenuity, that for me is where I go to the Venn diagram. I get to the end of the mapping and I'm saying, okay, these are the skills that we can borrow. These are the skills that we can build or that we already have. And
exactly.
for me, I mean, humility. I'm just happy I can say I'm intelligent for once, for work. This is awesome.
There you go. Exactly. I love that.
You recently wrote something about creativity in the age of AI.
Mhm.
And so can AI demonstrate creative and original thinking? Are we there yet?
It depends on what we mean by creativity, right? I like to think of creativity in two ways. One is the big C creativity. So, that is creativity in the sense of creating art or composing music or creating new original works of some sort, right? And that is expressive creativity, you would say. And the other is small C creativity, which to me is the ability to think of new ways of doing things. So someone who's big C creative would be someone like Beyonce, and small C creative could be someone like even the CEO of a company like VMware, which is where I worked, or they tend to think of different ways of doing things, especially leaders within tech organizations. So I distinguish between the two, and I think it's important because AI has demonstrated the ability to be creative in both domains. Obviously, today we know that there's a mechanism within AI known as adversarial networks that are responsible for developing new works of art, right? Whether they're influenced by previous works of art or they're completely new is yet to be determined. And I think that's where the debate over creativity can come in. But nonetheless, we do have AI that can compose from a certain set of data or a certain set of images, image data, audio data, whatever it is. They can create or generate new content, and that certainly is big C creativity or an element of it. But then there's also the small C creativity, which is actually was demonstrated a few years ago by AlphaGo, which was created by DeepMind. So DeepMind, prior to being owned, or I think at this time it might have already been owned by Google, DeepMind created AlphaGo, which was an AI deep learning model that was designed to play the game Go, which is an extremely complex game with countless permutations and combinations, very famously played in parts of the world such as China and Korea. And the way that there's a great documentary about this on YouTube, I'd highly recommend it to anyone listening to check it out. But the way that AlphaGo demonstrated, or the way that AlphaGo won against the world's best human Go player is by playing a move that was never before seen in the history of the game. Therefore, it developed or demonstrated original thinking. So in that case, I think there have been a few moments, but I must admit that they are far and few between. So it's not like AI is out there every single day thinking of original ways to do things. And certainly the most important mechanism for getting AI to demonstrate any sort of original thinking or creativity is through reinforcement learning models, which are very difficult to develop, and only a few people in the world are actually doing or developing those models, right?
So here's where I get confused or I get a block. I mean, I look at best practices. Best
Mhm.
practices are things that we have compiled from the past. And for me, using them today for anything other than pure operational challenges, I don't think works because
Mhm.
we don't want to apply the past to the future. Now,
Yes.
AI, in my understanding, would be best practices, the ability to compile on steroids. So when you talk about creativity,
Mhm.
I'm getting a break there. I'm not seeing creativity based on compilation or best practices.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it really depends. You mean that people are not demonstrating creativity or that the AI is
I
not
think
able
that
to?
people are. I don't understand how AI can create something truly new because it's based on patterning.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I think that's why I just differentiated between big C and small c. So, and I say that the big C creativity, which is AIs that can create new works of art. So there's an AI tool out there that people might be familiar with known as Midjourney, right? And Midjourney creates really mind-blowing works of art that would be very rare for human artists to create. And that's because it's got this huge data set of all these different kinds of influences and images, and it's also it hallucinates, like it's a bit wacky, right? So it can create a sort of output that's almost unpredictable for us. And to me, that is a kind of creativity, but I do think that it goes into semantics when it comes to using AI in the workplace, for the most part, we're using it, as you so astutely pointed out, to sort of co-execute on steroids, right? And I think that that's absolutely where the value add comes. What it can do is it can, within workplace organizations, I believe it can unlock higher levels of creativity, right? But I do tell by taking care of a lot of the mundane and routine work that we would otherwise be caught up doing. I do believe, however, and I often use the example of Rafiq Anadol, who's an artist who initially used to just create digital art, and then he started to create art using AI. So he would build the algorithm, feed images into the algorithm, and create art that's both Rafiq and AI generated. And he'd have these really mind-blowing exhibitions and demonstrations in New York City, commissioned by some really large museums and so on. And I think what Rafiq did a few years ago was demonstrate what we can do if we want to by combining our intellectual or creative prowess with AI. And which is why at the beginning, when I started the conversation, I said I see it as a medium for doing more if we choose to use it, right? But I do believe that a lot of the myths or perceptions around AI outdoing us, or suddenly somehow magically coming up with goals of their own to think of creative ways to destroy the human population. These things are certainly far-fetched, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So while they're entertaining to entertain those thoughts, it is important to remember that at this particular stage, and even given the development of the technology over the next few years, more likely we're going to use it as almost another person or collaborator with whom we do things, but it still requires the input of the person, the initial human, right, who actually wants to create something. Yeah.
And I do love when you talk about collaborator, because I mean, it's institutional and historic memory sitting at the table and processing at a speed that obviously we will never even think about doing as individuals.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So, Tannya Jajal, tell us about your firm. Tell us about AIDEN.
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to work at VMware for many years, and I actually started AIDEN soon after everyone got on board with the AI thing. So for about 5 years, whilst I was leading cybersecurity and machine learning channel development at VMware within the region that I was covering, I equally had started to do a lot of writing and education and delivering and creating content, educational content in the style of workshops and curriculum, specifically for AI. So obviously that was taking up a little bit of my time. It was a passion project at the time whilst I was at VMware, but when the world started to catch up with everything that happened, aka after November 2022, when ChatGPT was released, the demand for it really grew, and I felt a pressing need to do something about it officially, institutionally, which is why I collaborated with a few advisors and close friends and collaborators that I've known over the years who I've been doing a lot of projects with, and I set up AIDEN. So AIDEN is now set up as an independent AI for education company. We have set it up as a think tank in the UAE. We're partnered with the government here, and we're working to deploy and develop AI skills academies across different segments of the population. So we start with young people, but we go all the way up to existing workforce. And we have something specific, especially built for the older workforce. So people who have been in the workforce long enough and require some reskilling. So what we're doing is deploying those AI skills academies across the GCC, and it's been a very exciting endeavor. We're partnered with some leading schools and institutions to be able to reach as many people as possible through our programs, because all of them are multidisciplinary and all of them are actually project-based. So they're all designed to help you think about or help you enable you to solve problems with AI rather than simply learn about what machine learning is.
Okay, so I'm a CEO. What kind of problem can you help my team solve?
Yeah, great question. So essentially what we would do with CEOs is we'd go in, get their heads of departments together and help them identify the pain points or their existing workflows basically within their organization, and then help them figure out where they can plug in AI in the short term. But we also draw from something known as the exponential organizations framework, the OpenExo framework is something that was created by Salim Ismail a few years ago, and there's a great little book on it called Exponential Organizations. So we enable those organizations to think about how they can exponentially grow based on a few different frameworks and so on. And one of the key things to make that happen that we've discovered is automation and artificial intelligence. So the distinction there is a distinction there, and we don't limit ourselves simply to AI. It's just that right now, that's the semantic that seems to most fit the kinds of technologies that we enable organizations to use.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Tannya, let's take the conversation a little lighter for a minute.
Yeah.
Neurosymbolic AI. That's I'm sure that anyone who's been through a drive-through knows what that is.
Oh, absolutely.
So combines logical reasoning and language processing to interact with questions akin to human intelligence. Still doesn't help me. Talk to me about neurosymbolic.
I'll talk to you a little about it. So, it's a great way to put it. And the term is so complex, but actually conceptually it's quite exciting for people. And here's why. So today, I think when it comes to most of the large language models that exist out there, large language models being things like Google's Gemini or OpenAI's ChatGPT, aka the same kinds of models that created the hype around AI, most of them today fall short on one thing, right? Which is they don't always tell the truth, meaning they tend to do something known as hallucinate. And this happens, essentially what a hallucination is for anyone who's a general user who's out there listening, it's not, at times you could hypothetically ask ChatGPT to create or write an entire document or essay based on a historical figure, and it could theoretically make up that entire historical figure and tell you with a lot of conviction exactly what the details affiliated with said figure are. It'll even make up sources and so on. This is a mechanism or a phenomenon known as AI hallucination, and it's a big problem because today it's the main reason or the main thing, that error rate, which is now 2 to 5%, the last I checked, within most models, is the main reason that industries in such as finance or healthcare, really highly sensitive industries, are not able to fully adopt large language models such as OpenAI's ChatGPT. So neurosymbolic AI is a different architecture that solves for that problem that is currently in works by some leading organizations such as Singularity Next. And essentially what it is this: the reason that ChatGPT hallucinates or makes mistakes is because its primary goal is essentially to predict what the next word would be in a string of words, right? So its primary goal is content creation, and it's fundamentally a probabilistic model. So it's designed to figure out the probability of what the next word will be after said word, right? So basically complete sentences. Whereas when it comes to neurosymbolic AI, the fundamental architecture is not that. Its goal is to reason. And so building the neurosymbolic AI is a lot more complicated because it requires that you have something known as knowledge graphs, which gives you inferences and correlations between different concepts in society, such as Tannya being a girl, lives in Dubai, does XYZ. So it makes certain correlations between phenomena like female, age, name, and location, and tells you what the probability of someone having those features, what their potential interest would be, and things like that. So those kinds of knowledge graphs require a lot of effort, but there have been people who've been doing it over the last few years. And I believe that they will create the next generation of large language models, which will be able to create and reason rather than just be probabilistic in terms of determining what the next word is. And therefore, you'll have AI that doesn't hallucinate, right? And that's why we're really passionate about it. So at AIDEN, we support a lot of those efforts and partner with those organizations building neurosymbolic AI.
I really like that and that understanding and the fact that next gen goes to the capacity to reason, not just, as you say, predict the next word. And they all depend on the inputs, but predictability, in my mind, goes even deeper into the quality of the input. And if you have false inputs or fake inputs, the predictability must be very challenged. So thank you for that.
Very true.
Tannya Jajal, founder of AIDEN. This has been great. Tell us about your book, Thinking Machines, AI and the Intelligence Explosions.
Absolutely. So my book was actually a series of essays and that I had written over the years, over the last 5 years, exploring fundamental concepts in AI, explaining them to a general audience. And actually, a lot of those essays have been used by universities for university students. So they've been leveraged in academia independently. So I decided to put those essays together and publish the book, Thinking Machines, AI and the Intelligence Explosion. And frankly, the research is evolving so fast that I would have to write another book pretty soon as a part two. However, fundamentally, the book is all about the fundamental architectures and algorithms and models that require or that researchers have been thinking about and putting effort into for so many years now to build machines that can do things that humans also do, right? So that's the mechanism, and each chapter includes summaries as well as questions to ponder and potential problems that need solving in specific domains. Obviously, we're very passionate about educational reform in this particular context, and that's why I wrote and published the book. So it's designed for people who have any interest in the future generation, future skills, future of work, and also understanding AI itself.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for writing the book, because I think all of us need to be focused on future skills and future work, because it's one of the top 3 disruptive challenges that we are seeing within organizations as well, and they have line items on their income statements, but they don't quite know what to do with the
Exactly.
stuff.
Absolutely.
It sounds like turning to you and AIDEN sounds like a pretty good first start. So thank you once again for being part of Ingenious Thinkers today, and look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you so much, Ken. It's been a pleasure.